Cartographer's Project and served as a Museum Studies Fellow with the Smithsonian's National American History and the National Museum of the American Latino. Currently, she is a visiting scholar with the University of Houston Center for Mexican American and Latino Studies. And this fall, she will join the University of Utah as assistant professor of Latinx Studies. Congratulations, Allison, Dr. Sáenz. So that is a little bit of background on each of us. I appreciate you sharing that with me so I can share with the panel. So let's go ahead and get started with some questions. This is a general question for everyone, Cristóbal, Sia, and Allison. As tell us about your path, maybe your academic and professional path to where you are, where you came from, where you go, where you are now, and what made you want to study history. Whoever wants to start first.
I can jump in, get us
Sure.
started. Okay. Hello everyone. So lovely to be with you all and recognize the classrooms of UTSA. I miss UTSA a lot. It was very formative for my long-term, career path. I graduated in December of 2017 from UTSA with a BA in history. And to make a long story short, right, so we can get to our other panelists, I always loved history, was a history major from the beginning, thought I was going to be a high school history teacher, but then started doing my own research and realized there was, historians do research too, right? It wasn't just about test tubes and, chemistry labs. And so I found that very intriguing. I debated law school at one point, but ultimately found myself really yearning to be in a graduate kind of environment to pursue history and to be a part of a scholarly conversation that I didn't see my own background represented in, as a daughter of Central American immigrants who met in Houston, hence my ultimate dissertation. But although I didn't have any internship experience while I was, an undergrad at UTSA, it was very, very critical for my work and my graduate school career at the University of Houston. There's a Center for Public History, and so I became really engaged and minored in that for my doctoral studies. And through that, found some of these internship opportunities that were listed, some more local, others more national, right? One that was already mentioned that I can get into later had to do with the medical field. So all this to say that historians can really, partake in very different kinds of spaces, not just the traditional, history classroom. But yeah, that's quickly my journey, and I pass it along to whoever might want to go next.
Great, thank you. Cristóbal or Sia, who wants to go next?
Go for it, Sia.
Oh no, not on the spot like Cristóbal. Hi everyone, I'm Sia. I'm currently located in Washington, D.C. I was starting out as a music major when I was at UTSA, but then the academic scholarship kicked in and I was like, why not do history? It was always something that I found really fun in high school, but I didn't know that I could pursue it more in depth, especially when my mom asked, how much money are you going to make as a history major? Can you make a list of jobs that you can do? And so from her questions, I really thought about how, a 4-year plan would look like, 5-year plan, and just the mentorship at UTSA has been really great in shaping, all the skills that you need for different internships, fellowships, and any career that you need. I applied to the internship at the National Nuclear Security Administration through the Oak Ridge National Lab, and then moved to the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory for the Graduate Fellowship Program, and that's where I moved now to DC. So it's been a little hard doing master's and then moving away from such an incredible campus with amazing faculty. But sometimes you just have to make that leap of faith, and it all works out in the end. So.
Thank you, Sia. Cristóbal.
Yeah, just first off, thank you to all the students who are here, and thank you to the faculty as well for putting this on together. So my journey is a little non-traditional. Let's see. So I graduated high school in 2012, and then I instantly started my degree. And then I want to say I dropped out about a semester and a half in. I was, like I'm sure many students have been at one point. I just didn't know what I wanted to do, was unsure about where I wanted to go. So I completely withdrew from college, and I stayed. I think I stayed in the workforce for about 3 years. And it's super funny, and I love sharing the story because it kind of shows, how sometimes life just kind of hits you like a brick wall. I was working in Houston in summer at a shop, pouring sweat, no AC, 100-degree weather, like 100% humidity, and I was like, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. So then I was, told myself I needed to go back to school. Similar to Allison, I wanted to be a high school history teacher, and I also wanted to coach football. I wanted to be your traditional high school football teacher, or high school football teacher, high school football coach, and history teacher. And then when I was signing up for classes, I saw that I had to take an 8 a.m. workout course, and I said I didn't want to do that, so I dropped my kinesiology major and became full history. And that is how I kind of, picked history as a degree. Went through the program. I completed my BA in history in 2019 from Charleston State University, a smaller university in North Central Texas in Stephenville. It was absolutely great. And my last semester at Tarleton, I took a class with one of their public historians, Dr. Deborah Lyles. We had class in a museum that Tarleton owns, and that was just completely eye-opening. I saw a different world, a different perspective of history and what can be done. Our class was literally in the archives, and that was just incredible. And I told myself that was something that I want to pursue. So that's kind of how I discovered public history. So with a semester left, I applied to 2 programs, Texas State and UTSA. I will be completely upfront when I say that UTSA was my second option because Texas State had public history. And I got into both, but UTSA offered me the Now Fellowship, which I was incredibly grateful for. And it was just an incredible opportunity and opened so many doors that I can share about later. And even though UTSA at the time didn't really offer public history, with the support of the faculty, I was really able to make most out of my time there. And as you heard from my introduction or from my bio, I was able to hold several internships at several different museums and institutions. So overall, it was just a fabulous experience, and a lot of that is due to the support of the faculty. Oh, and now I'm at the National Parks Conservation Association. Internships, just kind of have their way of opening different doors, and I'm happy to share about that later.
Yes. Definitely. Thank you so much, you all, for sharing your mine. I can share mine. I don't know if I can do that, but I also had kind of a roundabout way to getting to land in history. I started college way back in the 1900s at SMU up in Dallas. Struggled a bit, took a semester off, didn't go back for 20 years, almost 20 years. When I decided to go back to school, I also had been working a job. I was tired of, I wasn't sweating. I was working for I worked for Citibank for 13 years. I really was tired of it, decided I needed to go back to school, and ended up with a degree in Mexican American studies, because I really actually that was my major at SMU. It was ethnic studies with a concentration in Mexican American studies. I really liked it because it was interdisciplinary. There was history, anthropology, sociology, all sorts of different, different learning styles and different learning. And then I graduated in 2016. I decided to take some time off. I knew I wanted to get my MA, but I wanted to take some time off and really figure out what I wanted to do. I was working at Briscoe Western Art Museum downtown and really fell in love with Western art in the American West. And I really loved the historical aspect of art. My former boss, president, CEO, was a public historian. His wife is a public historian. So they encouraged me to get my degree in public history. I also applied to Texas State, but that's another story. Ended up at UTSA with a great recommendation from one of my docents who is an art history professor at UTSA. And so this is how I found history and really fell in love with, telling the stories of the American West and the U.S. borderlands. So that's just a quick little rundown. But let's continue with our questions as time moves along. This question is specifically for Cristóbal and Allison, as you are public historians. How do you define public history? And what made you consider public history rather than, what's a traditional history, like a history teacher or something like that? Were any of your classes different? What's different as far as the methods of study or the processes for public history versus traditional history?
I can get us started, Cristóbal, and then you can definitely jump in. I've come to describe public history as not just doing history about the public, but with the public. And I think there's a really strong distinction when it comes to that, right? And I think more academic, right, oriented histories, not to say that public history isn't academic and can't be academic, right? Tend to be rooted in the archive, right? And monograph or scholarly scholarship that sometimes is for circles that are smaller, right? Whereas public history seeks to expand that. And one of the ways that you come to expand that, right, is by not just working siloed. You work with people and contribute to larger projects, whether that sometimes is maybe a monograph, but also can be, a museum exhibition, a digital history project, et cetera, et cetera. And so I will say that there definitely is, right, a different kind of skill set that you are building when you are partaking in internships or taking certain classes. I know for me, at the graduate level, that meant at U of H that for my minor field, I had to do certain classes rooted in oral history practices and tool building skills. Oral history was a really big one for me, which was pivotal for my dissertation and just at large how I function as a public historian. I see it as really critical. Archives classes, right? Because archive is another huge branch of public history. The ethics of public history is another huge thing, that is important to the kind of work, since you are often working with others, and sometimes those communities can be vulnerable, right? Or underserved. And so it's important to know how to work ethically and write ethically about everyone, right? And so, yeah, I'm trying to think of what classes in particular I took. I feel so far from coursework at this point, but all of those, right, seek to build you a toolkit, right, which I think is a toolkit that's not just going to help you write papers, is going to help you how to build projects, work with others, and disseminate history, right, beyond a traditional classroom.
Yeah, so taking some of the tools from your traditional history classes and using them in a public way.
100%.
Definitely. If you think of a class, you can jump in. Cristóbal, go ahead and
Yeah,
share.
no, I think that was spot on. I love describing history or public history now as, doing history with the public and for the public, and it's super funny you quoted that because I have this book as one of my favorite public history books right next to me, Museum Monuments and National Parks, and that's how the author describes public history is doing history with the public. And that's one of the reasons that I decided to kind of explore it as a career, because of that opportunity and being able to work with different communities and, working alongside them to help them preserve their history. And I think the Blackwell School has really been an exceptional example of that, with the different workshops that we've had, and different parts of the process, with even getting the site designated to begin with. It was always a community-led effort. And even now post designation, just helping stand it up, helping, getting the site the resources and everything that it needs, and working with the city to, you know, draw connections, put up sidewalks, put up signage, right? Like those are all, you know, it's finding ways to connect the site to the community itself, and that's, you know, that's active public history. And just as I mentioned, you know, a little bit ago, I think having that class in that museum in a place that's public facing, you know, meant for the public to come in and be able to absorb and learn about history in a way that's a little bit more accessible, to me really opened my eyes of different ways that we can communicate history to the public, and that really drew me. And you know, as Allison mentioned, that, you know, doing oral histories and stuff like that, as well as one of the things that I love the most about public history work is, you know, being able to conduct oral histories and also work with the public, you know, to create something from them, whether it be an archive, an exhibit, and stuff like that. Yeah, it's been a really a great field to work in.
That's really good. And you mentioned, you know, the signage and the sidewalks and all of the mundane, you know, kind of physical pieces, you know, working in an archive, you know, that maybe, you know, people don't necessarily see or realize are there, but it's all part of that public history experience. I wanted to share quickly about one of my public history experiences. I was able to work with the Texas Historical Commission on a project. They were relaunching their app. So if you download the Texas Historical Commission app, working on the back end, reorganizing all of their photographs from every single county, from every single historical site in Texas, and documenting those and getting those in order so that they could be loaded onto the app. That's, you know, a form of public history. It's all in the back end. Nobody saw what I was doing, but the you know, when the consumer or people download the app and use it as they're driving around Texas, that information is readily available. So it's a lot of, sometimes it's some of those, you know, small, mundane, you know, invisible tasks that make it easier for the public to access that history. So yeah, definitely good stuff. So let's move on. I'm going to ask my next question. I'm going to start with Sia, since tell us about your work now. So what you're doing, and whether your internship experiences have helped expand your professional network, have, you know, helped you get to where you are today.
Yeah, so I'm an analyst within broader DOE. The past 2 years within NNSA, one was in defense nuclear nonproliferation. So again, having the nonproliferation concerns in nuclear research reactors, from highly enriched uranium to low enriched uranium, then going to defense programs, and that's a whole other kettle of fish. Just making sure that our stock modernized and is ready to use whenever, if we ever, God forbid, we ever have to use it, to being more of an analyst here. I felt amazing growth during this whole process through internship, fellowship. It was within the same realm at NNSA, so that was really easy. Getting to talk to former interns and fellows made the process a lot better. Your mentors are usually former fellows as well. And then transitioning to this job, I actually share an office with a former fellow. And we regularly meet with new fellows of, hey, you know, these are the career trajectories that you can go on. Here, like the universities that we've all been in. Thankfully, there have been more UTSA people that have come through the pipeline, and some of the NGFP HR ladies will be here. I say here at UTSA in the fall. So if you ever want your resume checked or just a cover letter, however you pronounce that, they'll go and recheck it for you, and they'll offer more like one-on-one guidance, just for the internship. But usually it's emails, the mundane meetings, meeting with your leadership, and then actually having products that you can put in front of leadership. I've briefed the head of DOE before. I've got to shadow the Deputy Secretary of Energy as he was going for his State Department visits, and his COP28 speech whenever he went to Abu Dhabi. So it was a really nice way to engage and get mentorship. Fun fact, they do like a lot of the UT system students. Selfish plug for DOE. We just love the work ethic that's down south. They really respect the schools because they aren't traditional pipeline schools within the government system. And they just like the sirs, the ma'ams, all of the food down here. So if you ever want to come to DOE, they will welcome you with open arms.
Thank you. That's awesome. So definitely working on your networking relationships, that sort of thing. Cristobal and Allison, did you want to add to that some of, what you're working on now and how your internships may have helped you along the way?
Yeah, happy to share. So in my long list of internships that I had in grad school, one of the ones that was extremely important to me and where I am now was my internship with the Latino Heritage Internship Program. That was an internship that was actually shared to all students at UTSA. It was my first time ever really hearing about the program, and the program is intended to introduce students of Latino Hispanic descent into careers with the National Park Service. So each internship, you're kind of put with a park, depending on what your background is. Mine was actually at San Antonio Missions, which was awesome. It was local, which is what I wanted. And that internship was my first summer of grad school. Fast forward to my last summer of grad school, the National Parks Conservation Association was looking for an intern to archive some oral histories. And it just so happened that the board, or my boss with LHIP, it was on the board of NPCA, so she was able to connect me with the organization, told me that they were looking for someone, because her and I had still kept in touch. So she told me that they were looking for someone, and I applied for the internship and was able to get it. So that lasted about a summer. But again, one thing I think is extremely important is always maintaining relationships with places that you intern with your previous bosses, because you never know when, doors will open up. So I was able to maintain a really good relationship with NPCA and the staff at NPCA. And 8 months after I graduated, a full-time position came up. And a lot of it was continuing on some of the work that I worked on as an intern. So I applied, and fortunately I was able to get it. And I think, a big reason of why I'm here today is because of that first internship that I had my first semester, or my first summer of grad school with LHIP. It really introduced me to national parks and how I can use my history degree, my background, my training as a public historian in National Park Service and cultural resource management.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if you're gonna go ahead and ask the
Go ahead.
question. Yes, I'll make it as brief as possible. Another internship that I want to shout out that was really critical for me during graduate school, that allowed me to return to the Smithsonian on a second time, is the Latino Museum Studies Program Fellowship, which has an undergraduate, a graduate fellowship, and then a pre and postdoctoral fellowship. They are open to anyone. You do not have to be Latino, Latina, Latinx to apply to the program, but it is an incredible view into, one of the largest cultural, institutions in the world. And when I did the graduate fellowship in particular, it had a practicum component to it, which meant that I was put in as placed as part of a team under the, I think, political history division. I think it's changed names at this point, but it was about broadening the museum's collections at that point through an initiative called the Undocumented Collecting Initiative. So bringing in more materials to the museum that spoke to undocumented citizens in the United States. And ultimately, right, that experience really, I think, helped me get the pre-doctoral fellowship that I applied for 2 years later, which helped me complete my dissertation. And so I kind of, yeah, I'm sitting here as I've gone the academic track, but I did debate, you know, when graduating last year if I was going to go into the more public-facing public history field. So I'm also happy to answer any questions about those distinctions and why I ultimately chose academia. But public history follows me everywhere, and I think it is one of the things that on the job market in academia really allowed me to stand out in a way, because much of my work, right, isn't just about you know, the scholarship that I'm hoping to bring into the world, but about the relationships and you know, the community building that I aim to be a part of. And so one of the classes, right, that I couldn't think of like 5 minutes ago was an oral history class in graduate school, which, you know, went into the practical aspects of it, the ethics of it, the logistical aspects of what it means to interview someone, right? And also build an oral history project. And that was critical for my dissertation, is critical for where I'm at now in my work, and will continue to be part of my toolkit, you know, since oral histories are so integral to my work as a you know, as a scholar of Latino studies and history, but also of you know, public history is right there. It's part of that toolkit.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you. Surprisingly, I have never taken an oral history class. I did take a public history course in as an undergrad, so I did a public history project on the Texas Farm Movement of 1966. And that led me to, they used my research for writing the grant for the Texas Historical Commission to get that marker down in Rio Grande City and in Stark County. And then I was able to work on the Texas Historical Commission for a few months. And I've used that you know, I've made that presentation with the Now Fellowship and used it for research and others as well. So, you know, public history has been a part of my journey as well. So some of y'all have mentioned, you know, the various places you've had your internships and where you've worked. What sort of tasks were you assigned? I'm sure you didn't go in and you're running the place. Some of these tasks may be really mundane and really menial. You know, what types of skills did you learn? You know, we've learned that, you know, relationships and those networking is really important, but what other sorts of skills maybe you picked up in your internships that you think are important? Anyone who wants to jump in?
I'll go
Cristóbal.
first. Yeah. So one piece of advice that I always give students is to explore the field while you're still in school. You know, whether it's undergrad or grad school, you know, exploring the field while you're still in school through internships. Because of that, you know, there's so much that you can do with history, and there's so much that you can do with public history. I mean, goodness, it took Sia to DC to work in the Department of Energy. Like, who would have thought, you know? But one of the, you know, I say that because there's so much that you can do, that you explore different career paths, you know, that all are different things. A lot of times they're not very similar. Just to give you an example, you know, I did archiving before, and archiving tends to get really lonely. You know, you're kind of by yourself with just a stack of things that, you know, you're archiving and you're processing. And if you're an extrovert, you know, you might not like that so much because you're in an archive, right? On the other side, you know, I've done museum tours when I worked at the Ben Hogan Museum of Dublin. I was more or less like a museum docent. So I would open up the museum, conduct tours and stuff like that. And that, you know, that requires you to be public facing, that requires you to be, you know, kind of more extrovert like, and if you're an introvert, that might not be your thing. You know, and it's important to explore that, or to explore the kind of different fields and the different skill sets that are required, you know, for different career paths while you still have the chance in school. Because, you know, they're, like I said, they're all different. You could do archiving, museum work, tours, and stuff like that. And those are some of the things that I did. It was a lot of archiving and a lot of tours. Most of my most of my internships. Thankfully now I'm a little bit more public facing, because I did work for an archive for a little bit after grad school, and it gets lonely. It gets lonely.
Definitely. Sia, did you want to share, or Allison, go ahead.
Yeah. No, okay. I quickly also want to speak about an internship that I never expected to have because it was such a different field than, you know, what you think of when you're thinking of history, and that is I did a summer internship with MD Anderson, so one of the the cancer hospital here in Houston, as an oral historian, actually a couple, well, two. I did it on 2 different summers. But they essentially were just looking for an oral historian, you know, a student during the summer to conduct oral histories um, for the institution. And the projects looked very different each summer. So the first summer it was about the history of the faculty senate, and how, especially as a hospital that is also academic and is a school as well, kind of the intricacies of that and the evolution of the faculty senate. And then the following summer it was about particular individuals who are, you know, important to the institution, and taking a more broader focus. And that was part of the Historical Resources Center at MD Anderson, which up until me being a part of the internship, I had no idea existed. But, you know, when thinking about it now and after my experiences, makes total sense that that exists at like within a hospital, right? And so that internship for me was really eye-opening, kind of as Cristóbal is saying, in terms of just thinking of the different ways that you can really apply some of the skills that you learn in classes or on the job, right? And for me, this meant that not only I was conducting oral histories, but I was also processing and indexing them. So writing abstracts, they have a very particular way in which they index, and so following that protocol in order for them to then be able to upload that on their end and then make it public facing. And again, also it made me realize how I probably would not thrive in an environment like that, because the kinds of histories that you're recovering sometimes have a lot of red tape. I remember asking certain questions and certain leaders being hesitant to ask because they're also tied to the state in some way, and funding and MD Anderson is a whole thing. And so they would kind of shy away, but like the whole point of an oral history, right, is to try and, you know, draw out those narratives. And so it's like that balance, right? And again, I talk about ethics a lot because I think it's so important when you're, you know, you're just working with people, right? And at MD Anderson, that played a really huge role. But yeah, the kind of hospital setting I don't think is for me, but it could be for some who are, you know, interested in working collaboratively, right? Because there is it was a really wonderful team that I was a part of both of those summers. But yeah, allowed me to really think of these skills that I used to write about Houston, right, and about a migrant community. I'm in a very different setting, right, and for like institutional purposes.
Definitely good information. Sia, what are some of the tasks that you did, or some of the day-to-day internship processes?
Yeah, so during my internship, it was full-time during the academic and summer semesters. It was online, so it was really lonely. I didn't meet any of my cohort. There's about, gosh, 90 of us, and we're all just trying to pack into one Zoom conference. It was a lot of emails. I was in the front office doing taskers, and so Congress will come down the DOE and then all the way down the chain to the smallest little ant, all the way back up to Congress. Just really quick turnarounds. I realized I do not like that. There was like 20 taskers one day, and they're all quick turnarounds. And you're just trying to coordinate with the different sub offices in your group, trying to coordinate, okay, how do I put this in the tracker? Is the tracker uploading? It was just a mess. So I respect front office workers so much. They have a very thankless job. And then luckily, I was able to do those oral histories, so detailing and cold emailing some people from the laboratory systems like Argonne National Laboratory and Idaho National Laboratory to really sink our teeth into how does a nuclear reactor conversion, removal, and disposal work? How can we translate it from more of a scientific perspective to a more policy-focused oral history, and then detailing that to our front office, giving them briefs of, hey, this is what we did in the past. How can we learn from it? What are we doing now with our other conversions, our removals, and our very sticky disposal procedures? Moving to the fellowship, it was a lot of emails, a lot of meetings and coordination with partners. And because we always love to be in a CR or continuing resolution, no one gets a funding. There's a lot of work that has been paused. So just taking that time to network and communicate with other offices, because at the same time it's a fellowship, you're trying to look for a new job. So that was a little spicy to get into. So I really do appreciate the networking. I really appreciated just learning different facets of like typical maybe office jobs. And then it really inspired me to, no, I don't want to be in the front office, but I would like to do more like sit down and communicate with people as much as I can. And using the skills that I think that we've all been talking about of just that research, finding out what you like during your degree program, whether it's bachelor's all the way to PhD, and really communicating with your UTSA peers as well, because you never know, what's out there. So in your internship or job, anything, you only know what they know, and then, oh, this could lead me down this direction. Then talking to UTSA peers, and even peers that aren't in our realm either, just going out and talking to, I mean, Allison was in the hospital systems too. I mean, that is not somewhere where I thought a historian would be, but it's just those transferable skills that keep transferring.
Definitely, really good. So lots of tasks, lots of menial paperwork and following processes and procedures that, we don't necessarily think about unless you have that experience. And definitely, all of you have mentioned, and I will reiterate the importance of the internship is getting to know what you like and don't like in your future, job endeavors. I did an internship with the Institute of Technical Culture, RIP ITC building. But one of the tasks that I had to do was paint teeny tiny letters and numbers on various archival items. And so I had to sit there and practice for hours before they would actually let me paint on the items. And I had, the tiniest little brushes. I also had to make archival boxes from scratch because you can buy archival boxes, but not everything fits in a perfect square or a perfect rectangle. So, you had to, make a box for a dress or make a box for a boomerang this little boy had from, Stubing Ranch or something. So making archival box. I knew I did not want to work in conservation after doing my internship at the ITC. So it's those types of tasks that that are reserved for interns for a reason. So really good information. Let's see where all of you have interned in some sort of public history related institution. You've even interned at something that would not be considered historic, like a historical site or historical building. So that's really, I think, important for us to mention, that, I know in the past year, I've created some, information guides for our students where you can look and what you can look up, but really use your imagination. If there's an organization you're interested in, go on their website, email them, talk to your professors. They may know somebody somewhere. I think that's probably my number one piece of advice is talk to your professors, get to know your professors, because that way they know what you're interested in. They have their own connections. They know people. So I have a couple more questions, but we're getting close to the end. So I think I'm just going to ask one more because some of these, some of these may kind of overlap. This will be kind of a fun question. What did you like most about some of your internships, or what was one of your favorite internships? Cristobal, you mentioned kind of being a docent, that made you realize that it's not what you wanted to do. I think we've all mentioned thing. So what is maybe some of your favorite, internship places or process or something that you did?
Oh, Cristóbal, did you want to go? I don't know if mine is a really any standout moment, but I will say that I was that, history nerd growing up that dreamt of the Smithsonian and like thought of it as this very particular, thing. And then, came to find out it's over like 20 units and, learned some of its institutional history while there. But I think my internship, or like my practicum, right, with my graduate fellowship while I was there the first time was very much rooted on like the top floors where all the offices are. And so, whether I was doing, more like academic oriented research for the collections or doing collections research for stuff they already had, to me, my favorite part was like sneaking away during lunch and going into the exhibits. Because when else like can you do that, right? Like, I just felt so privileged and thankful to be there. And so, as much as it's important, right, to learn what you don't like, I really, find the spaces that bring life to you, right? And for me, I'm always gonna love a museum space, and was really thankful for those opportunities and like just bouncing from museum to museum. And the Smithsonian is a really great yeah, just institution. And so I was really thankful for those opportunities and the many lunches that I spent just kind of walking, the various exhibitions.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
I can go. So I think my favorite internship,
Cristobal, did you want to jump in now?
do I? Oh, so my favorite internship, I think would have to be my time at San Antonio Missions National Historical Park. Um, I had never really explored national parks too much or the National Park Service too much, whether as a visitor or in my, degree or career path. So being able to intern at the site was really eye-opening. Even though my research, I did a lot of historical research while I was there, and I was able to publish a couple of great in-house great reports. I got to go to the actual mission sites themselves, got to spend time with the park rangers, got to see how park rangers interacted with visitors, got to see how the visitors interacted with the site itself. And that was super cool. And even, in doing so much history, so much deep dive, more than kind of the surface level that a lot of the times people are given. I was also conducting a couple of tours. I got to conduct a couple of like VIP tours just because of how much in-depth knowledge I had of the site itself as an intern. So that was really great, just learning more about the National Park Service, what it is as an institution, and its role and kind of being, one of our nation's leading storytellers. That was really incredible. Yeah, so that's probably my favorite internship.
Awesome. Sia, did you want to share some of your favorites?
Yeah, so definitely the fellowship program was my favorite internship. The first week of orientation, they fly you out to Richland, Washington. You get to see the host facility. You get to go to the B reactors, one of the reactors for the Manhattan Project, get to tour that, and just really get to know your core cohort. There were, I think, 59 of us that all went to Richland, Washington. You land at midnight, you have no idea who you're hopping in a car with, and it's just one of those, if I could get kidnapped, it was definitely that time. But it's some of those fun memories that have really shaped the relationships with that cohort. We also had a pretty nice travel budget. So we'd be able to go to the National Ignition facility located in Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, California. We were there for one of the testings, and then we actually got to tour the inside of the facility. We also did some other comprehensive trainings at other laboratories. And then for some reason, they allowed us to do one of the Stockpiled Stewardship Management Program meetings in Las Vegas, which was very interesting to see all of the old scientists kind of gather around at the slot machines, and you're trying to be on your best behavior because you need to have a job. But just connecting with that old institutional knowledge as well. Some of the people that were there actually knew Oppenheimer back in the day. They knew the greats, the big scientists, and just capturing that knowledge, whether in a conversation or an oral history, it's just humbling to be in their presence. And it really makes you think that we are the next historians, we are the next practicing in our fields. So just really learning and capturing that, it's surreal.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. All right, we've got a few minutes left, so I want to open for any questions from our students or our guests. If anybody wanted to answer a question, I saw a hand wave. I don't know if you had a question, Santiago.
Uh,
Do you have a question?
I cannot. I cannot lost that. Can you come back to me later?
Okay. Does anyone have a question or something for any of us?
I have tons of stuff, but I'll let the students
Okay.
go. Okay.
I saw David Altamoz.
Yeah.
Did you have your hand up?
Hey, yes. So one of the things I'm trying to do right now is just trying to look. I know there's on the top floor of the McKinney Humanities Building, they have like all these QR codes to scan for internships and whatnot, and I have like a whole list of them. But I'm just trying to find and see what other ones are available currently and where I can look in case, because I kind of find them scattered everywhere sometimes.
That's a really good question. I know it's really about thinking about the what you're interested in doing. Maybe, do a Google search of some different organizations or some different institutions that like and list those in their like job postings on their websites. You can also look at Handshake, the UTSA kind of LinkedIn version. We'll have some internships as well. I think you can filter out for internships. What else? I know we had an internships like Canvas tab at one point. I don't know if it's still there, if some of those organizations are still listed. But Canvas had some information earlier in the school year. So that's what I can come up with. I don't know if anyone else has any other
Yeah,
thoughts on.
that sounds pretty good. I'm just trying to find something in public history, and I don't know if like you have any advice. I think this is the big one though. Like finding them is one thing, but also like if you have anything like they'd like to see on a resume, really anything that is very important that would attract them at all.
It really just depends on the organization and what it is. But definitely list your work experience because you never know what sort of work experience will translate. Your classes that you've taken, definitely include a transcript. I know, sometimes we struggle with putting together a resume or a cover letter. The Student Success Center there at UTSA is really good at offering some workshops and offering some, help on that. I would definitely reach out to, help them put together your resume and, using the proper terminology, keywords, and that sort of information for your resume and cover letter.
Great, thank you.
One thing
Sure.
that I want to add on that a little bit, Rebecca, is that I've been in the situation where I've hired interns before with my current role in PCA, and I've seen it firsthand where students sell themselves short on their resume because they don't think that their experience applies. I would say put it on there. Just to give you an example, I was talking with a student one time, and I was actually helping her on her resume. and she didn't know whether or not to put that she was a lifeguard on her resume. And as someone who has hired people before, to me, that if I see that you're a lifeguard, I see that you are willing to save someone's life. And I think that that is important. And that is, something that to me sticks out. So, really, I would say put it all on there. And please, always feel comfortable asking someone, whether it's a faculty member, a staff member, someone else that you may know to look it over, right? Have someone sit down with you and look over your resume. And then, maybe after you put everything on there, then you can kind of filter it down. But, just don't ever sell yourself short. If you've done it, I think it's important enough to be on there. And I recommend, just putting it all on there.
Yeah, I
Right.
gotta say that kind of that's actually really important because at times I sort of disregard that kind of stuff really. Because I've taken like really small time jobs and everything. I think they're not really of use, but you're probably right.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. Don't sell yourself short. But definitely reach out for help from, the UTSA campus has great resources on resume and cover letter writing. The cover letter is also important because then it kind of summarizes your key experiences and how it translates to a particular institution. So definitely good advice. Any other questions? We've got a couple minutes. I don't want to overtake anybody's time. Santiago, did you think of your question?
I did, but I think that opinion was not relevant to this conversation. But I did have another question. Um, uh, could Cristóbal kind of already answer this for me? But now that you're in the other side of the intern, I imagine that you're now hiring or working with interns. What piece of advice would you give to someone now that you're on the other side?
I will offer one piece of advice, and I can turn it over to the others. While you're in grad school and while you're a student, I think that it's really important. This is something that I fully regret not doing when I was in grad school. It's super simple, but make a business card. Because a lot of the times, like you just have, whether you're at a conference or something. Santiago, this is a perfect example. I went to your poster presentation last week, and I had maybe a minute, right, to chat with you just because we're rolling to the next thing. And unfortunately, I didn't get to hear from your research, a whole lot. That I think would have been a great example, of like, oh, here's my business card. I would love to chat with you more. Even as a student, right? Just handing your card has your information on there. That way you're able to connect with people more. Yeah, I think that is something that I think it's overlooked quite a bit. They're super. I think you can print like 200 for $5. And I even think that the university might be able to print them for you.
Yes.
But those are just super
The
quick ways that you
graduate
can
school,
connect
the
with people.
UTSA. Yeah, the UTSA graduate school office or whatever it's called will create business cards for you. Like 50 of them for free or 100 of them for free. So definitely take advantage of that. I had those and I would take them with me to conferences and share them with people.
Yeah. See, Allison, do you have anything else you would want to add?
It's free. Take advantage of it.
Very quickly, I'll just say know your worth when you are on like this job market. Sometimes there are really awesome internships that you come across and then you see that they are unpaid, right? Sometimes they will offer course credit, and I think that's really awesome. And volunteer opportunities can be really great. One of my most formative, kind of experiences in graduate school was being a volunteer archivist for this church archive that was really pivotal for some of my work, but also like the hospital MD Anderson internship that I did also was the one that paid the best, right? And sometimes you do have to kind of navigate, what works best for your personal situation because, we live in an economy where it's important to pay the bills, right? And so know your worth, right? And like what are the things that you're kind of willing to be flexible on and what you're not. But you all bring something to the table, so highlight that in your resumes, highlight that in interviews, and know that yeah, you deserve a seat at the table.
I would
Yeah,
just add,
definitely.
don't be afraid to leave. I didn't want to leave San Antonio. I've been here for so long. It's where all my family is. But sometimes you just have to make that leap of faith. It's well worth it. And there is absolutely no shame in saying, I don't like it. I'm just going to restart and do something completely different because it's much better to do something that you love and that you're passionate about that also pays the bills, instead of sitting there because the prestige or, oh, this is what I thought I wanted to do. This is what everybody else is doing. Do it for you. Do it because you want to.
Definitely, definitely good advice. Any other last questions? Gabriela, I know you had.
Hello. So thank you all very much. This has been a
questions.
wonderful
I don't know
panel.
if you want to squeeze one.
Well, for whoever can hang out, basically, I have a question regarding sort of like digital humanities, AI, all this interesting high-tech stuff that's developing and how it might impact public history, and historical studies in general. I just wonder if any of you have already started to engage with this 21st century technological developments, and what do you think about that? Is it a threat? Is it an opportunity for history students and interns?
That's a great
question.
question.
A
I
loaded
want to jump
question.
in on that, if you don't mind. I was lucky as a part of my graduate program, I worked with Dr. Gibson on a digital history program that he had been working on, still works on. I still share it today with my students at Northwest Vista. And AI is very frustrating in some aspects when I find students are using ChatGPT to write their for class. But I think it can be very helpful if it's used in an educational way, and used to share, history in a way that the public can access it easier, making it easier, more easily accessible to the general public. I think a lot of times people think history is just old dusty books and it's meant for, old dusty professors. But, I think history is around everything, everywhere that we interact. Is history, especially living in Texas, Central Texas. San Antonio is a crossroads. And so we've got so much history. And so I think AI and that smart technology, I think, can be useful. As I worked on this digital history project with the Texas Historical Commission, using some of this technology to share the, pieces of history public. Uh, seeing this, it's exciting to try to figure out how to use it for educational purposes, I think.
I don't know if I can really speak to the AI question. If I'll be frank, AI scares me, and I probably do need to reckon with that more. Just when thinking about teaching, when thinking about it as a public historian, because I think it's so crucial. Like some of these videos coming up right now, I'm like, what? Like they're trippy. But I will say that I'm sure that there is a huge conversation in how like digital history and digital humanities practices can be can challenge maybe some of these things, right, that are coming out that really have no roots, no anchor, no sources. And yeah, I mean, one of the most exciting projects that I worked on as a graduate student was the Latino Cartographies project, which is out of CMAS, and it re-envisions an archive. So it's not just something you have to go, pull out of the stacks. It's a transportable board that is at both airports right now in Houston. And so re-envisioning the archive, I think it's, uh, peer-reviewed research out in interactive ways for people of all ages. And so I'm hoping and hopeful. I'm an optimist at heart, so I'm hopeful that, that kind of work that will continue and can meet our moment, because it is a pressing thing to think about.
Yeah, so that's a great question about AI, because it seems like very quickly it's only getting better and better. And I think that, it's going to be something that's going to be part of our world, and probably part of our everyday life. If you have an Alexa, right, that's AI, right? It's on our phones. But I think that there are ways that we can use it in our field. The first thing that comes to mind is I don't know if they're TikTok or Reels, but and I've seen them, then they're, day in the life of like 1400 frontiersmen, right? And you get to, for about 60 seconds, you get to explore someone's life as a 1400 century frontiersman. And that's interesting, right? Because I think that there's ways that you can like utilize it to explore something like that, to get people's attention. Of course, it isn't going to be, 100% accurate, but it gives us that visual representation of what it would have been like. So I think that there's ways like that we can use it. Am I going to be the one to do it? I don't know. But I think that, for historians, I think that the possibilities are there. And I mean, other agencies and institutions are using it. I know the Department of Interior has a ChatGPT AI, so it's there. Then there's just nothing. I think at this point, it's just a part of our lives now.
Yeah, I don't personally use it at all, and definitely not at work, because that would just be wild to do it at the Department of Energy, but we have seen stranger things. But it's really fun to look at it through an energy perspective as well, because just the sheer amount of energy and volume that goes into curating these, I think it would be a really fun historical, in my opinion, a fun historical conversation of like, hey, here's an energy transition. Here's how we're using this, and other public histories that surround, like, here's actually using AI, but here's actually the sheer volume of our domestic production of energy or other land grabs. It might go into national parks. How does that affect our geopolitical landscape here and internationally as well? But no, AI is just weird. I don't know.
I think so. Sia brings up something real quick that I want to add on, as yeah, that is the one part of AI that people don't think about, is the data centers and how much water and resources it takes to really run one of those. They're massive. They consume a ton of water. And they're probably going to put one outside of Marfa, where the Blackwell School is located, which is a couple hours north of Big Bend National Park. So it's, for me and my organization, or at least what I'm thinking now is, how is that going to impact the park? Is that going to impact cultural resource management? These are some of the other sides of AI that, aren't necessarily, it might not be what we think about, but it's, part of what comes with AI as
Resources.
well.
Yeah. Yeah, the water and electricity to run these is insane. Especially in West Texas. Wow. So we are at 4:39. I don't know if we have one last question or if we want to wrap up. This has been really nice. I love talking to all of y'all, reconnecting, connecting with Allison in person or face to face for the first time. Sia, I haven't seen you in so long. So it's really nice connecting with you all. Thanks again to UTSA for putting this together. Hopefully we can do more in the future. I'm always available to talk to our students in any capacity. So thank you again.
Thank you. That was a wonderful panel. Thank you all.
Thank you for having me and us.
Yes, thank you all so much.
Thank you. A lot of wonderful information.
Yes, thank you all.
And thanks to our students who joined us today.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Take care.